and it's a public speaking. Like everyone's got those little things they do to deal with stage fright, right? But have you ever heard that thing about just picturing everyone naked? I mean, come on. It's supposed to, like, make you less nervous or something. But honestly, if I did that, I think it'd just make things super weird. I remember this one time I was about to give a talk at this big industry thing, right? And this colleague, he was trying to help, I guess. He leans over and whispers to me, just picture everyone in their birthday suits. I swear I almost choked on my water. Not really the pep talk I needed. But it did get me thinking, about what actually works when you got to speak in front of people. Because I don't think it's about pretending you're not scared, right? I think it's more about knowing why you feel that way. And even more important than that, I think it's about, like, respecting the people you're talking to. It's funny, you ever heard that book of lists, the one that, like, ranks all kinds of random stuff? Well, it says that public speaking is the #1 fear, like, even more than dying, which is kind of crazy when you really think about it.
But it makes sense. Our brains are wired to see being alone in front of a crowd as like a threat. It's like primal or something. Imagine way back, caveman days, you're standing out in the open and everyone's staring at you. Yeah, not a good situation. So it's totally normal to feel those butterflies when you're up on stage. I remember this one time I was getting ready to go on CNBC, that finance news channel, and I was going to talk about AI trends. And even though I knew what I was talking about, like the back of my hand, I started sweating like crazy. Turns out sweaty palms are like, it's an evolutionary thing when we're stressed. Like, it helped our ancestors climb trees or something to escape danger. So even though I was just in a studio, my body was reacting like I was, like, facing a saber-toothed tiger. But here's the thing, that fear, the adrenaline, can actually help you. It keeps you sharp. It makes you more dynamic. The key is to, like, use that energy, not let it control you. And the best way to do that, you got to prepare. Practice, practice, practice. The better you know your stuff, the more confident you'll feel. It's not like the nerves just disappear, but you can, manage them. But it's not just about remembering your lines, right? You got to know who you're talking to. What are they interested in? What are their questions? What are you trying to help them understand or achieve? Because when you really get your audience, you're not just giving a presentation, you're having a conversation with them. You're connecting with them, like on a human level. And that's what really makes the difference. I'll never forget this time I saw this executive, like, totally bomb a presentation. He was reading from a script, and you could tell he hadn't even looked at it before. He was stumbling over his words, losing his place. It was Russ. And you could see the audience was just, like, tuned out. And it's not about being, like, super polished, right? It's about respecting people's time. When you're not prepared, it's like saying, my time is more important than yours. And nobody wants to hear that. So how do you make sure you're respecting your audience and giving a presentation that actually matters? Well, it starts with picking a good topic, something relevant, something interesting, something you're actually excited about. Then you got to do your research. Who are you talking to? What are they into? What are their pain points? The more you know about them, the better you can tailor your message to what they need. And don't forget about your title. That's the first thing people see, and it can set the tone for, like, the whole thing. Make it catchy, make it intriguing, and make it clear what you're going to talk about. Once you have your topic and title, start outlining your main points. Think of it like a roadmap, It helps you stay organized and make sure you cover everything. And of course, you got to practice. Practice until you know the flow, the timing, how to transition between things. Practice is like that secret weapon that helps you feel confident in front of anyone, no matter how big the crowd. But you know what? Sometimes, even with the best preparation, things don't go as planned. And that's okay. I remember this one time I was invited to give a talk at this big tech conference. The ones with all the fancy lights and stages. I was so excited. I've been working on this presentation for weeks, and I was ready to, like, blow them away. But when I got to the room, it was almost empty. Just a few people scattered around looking bored. Talk about a hit to the ego. But here's what I learned that day. It's not about how many people are there. It's about the connection you make. I call it the density theory of public speaking. A smaller, more engaged audience can be way more powerful than a huge, indifferent one. It's like the energy is more concentrated, and it makes this really cool feeling of intimacy and shared experience. So what do you do when you're facing a crowd that's not exactly thrilled to be there? Well, first of all, don't freak out. It happens. If you get a heckler, which thankfully doesn't happen too often, you can try to engage them with humor. Get the audience on your side, turn it into a moment you share. But if it's more like a general lack of interest, just stay calm and focus on giving your message with like passion and authenticity. There's always going to be at least a couple people who are into it, and your energy might just win over a few more. I remember this one presentation. It was about design thinking, like how to be creative with problem solving and coming up with innovative solutions and stuff. And there was this guy sitting right in the front row, just radiating bad vibes, arms crossed, frowning, like he was challenging me to impress him or something. But I just kept going, focused on the people who were, actually listening. And by the end, you wouldn't believe it, even Mr. Grumpy Pants had like a little smile. Well, maybe not a full-on grin, but definitely less frowny. The point is, you can't win everyone over, right? But you can, like, control your own energy and just try to give the best message you can. And speaking of how effective your message is, let's talk about feedback. Because let's be real, feedback can be rough sometimes. It can be all over the place, hard to understand. Sometimes it's just straight up harsh. But the thing is, feedback is how you grow, right? It helps you see how people are getting your message and how to make it, like, hit harder. I remember this one time after a presentation, I got this feedback form. It was like a total emotional roller coaster. One person said I was dynamic, but then someone else said I used my hands too much. Talk about mixed messages. But here's the thing. A lot of people are just too nice, to be totally honest. They'll say, great job, even if they were, like, secretly checking their email the whole time. So how do you get feedback that's actually useful? You got to be proactive at it. Don't just wait for people to come to you. Go to them. Ask specific questions like, what was the most helpful thing you learned? Or what could I have done differently to make this more interesting? Don't be shy about asking the host or organizer what they thought. They usually have a good perspective that can be super helpful. One thing I've learned over the years is that repetition is actually a good thing. It sounds kind of weird, right? Like, you don't want to bore people by repeating yourself. But honestly, most people need to hear things a few times before it really sinks in. Think about it. How many times did you have to hear those multiplication tables before you knew them by heart? So don't be scared to repeat your main points. Say them in different ways, Helps people remember and makes your message, like, stick with them. Another thing I've learned is that eye contact can be super weird, especially when you see people you know. I always feel like I should just stop and chat with them instead of, giving the presentation. It's like my brain can't handle being formal when I see friendly faces. It's something I'm still working on, but hey, we all have our things, right? But here's a thought that's kind of humbling, but also inspiring. A lot of times as speakers, we're not telling people something totally new. We're just reminding them of something they already knew, but in a different way, with a new perspective or making it clearer. It's like polishing a gem that was hidden in plain sight. And that's really powerful, actually, because sometimes all it takes is a little nudge, a little reminder to give someone a new idea or inspire them to actually do something. One of the most frustrating things about speaking, though, is that you can't control what people do with the information you give them. You can inspire them, you can teach them, you can try to persuade them, but in the end, it's up to them what they do with it.
Sometimes you're just like preaching to the choir, talking to people who already agree with you, which is fun, don't get me wrong, but it's always a little disappointing when you know the people who really need to hear it aren't even there. But hey, that's part of the challenge, right? And speaking of challenges, let's talk about some practical stuff you can do to make your presentations better. Like, remember how I mentioned that density theory before? Well, if you want to create that, like, energetic, engaged vibe, one trick is to fill up those front rows. And guess what works really well? Free stuff. People love free stuff. It could be books, like for me, since I'm an author, but it could be anything that's relevant and useful to your audience. Just something small to get people to sit up front and make that denser, more engaged crowd. Another little trick I've learned is to hide your mic wire under your shirt. It just looks neater and less distracting, Trust me, nobody wants to see a wire dangling around. And if you're the one speaking, ditch the name tag. I mean, everyone knows who you are, right? It's just clutter.
Oh, and when you're deciding between a lectern and a podium, if you want to move around more, be more dynamic, go for the podium. It gives you way more freedom to connect with the audience. And here's a big one. Always be ready for things to go wrong. Tech issues, forgetting your lines, even spilling coffee, it happens to everyone. The important thing is to stay calm and just go with it. If you blank on what you were going to say, don't freak out. Take a breath, look at your notes, or just admit you forgot and ask the audience if they have any questions. If your tech decides to die on you, try to stay positive and keep the audience engaged while you get it fixed. And if you spill coffee on yourself, well, laugh it off. People will appreciate you handling it gracefully and with a little humor. Remember, public speaking is like a performance, but it's also a conversation. And conversations, well, they don't always go perfectly. But that's all right. The important thing is to stay connected to your audience, be yourself, and share your message with passion and, enthusiasm. And who knows, you might even have a little fun while you're at it. You know, it's funny. When you think about public speaking, it's kind of like a performance, right? But it's also a conversation. You're up there, center stage, microphone in hand. But the whole point is to connect with the people listening, to make them feel like they're part of something. And to do that, you got to be a little vulnerable. You know, you can't be so worried about being perfect. You got to be okay with things getting a little awkward sometimes. Just be yourself, because people can spot a fake from a mile away. They can tell when you're not being real. I remember this one time I was asked to speak at this huge tech conference, and man, I was nervous. I really wanted to impress everyone, so I spent weeks crafting this super polished presentation, fancy slides, perfectly rehearsed speech, the whole shebang. But when I got up on stage, something just felt off. The audience was there, but they weren't really with me, polite, but not really engaged. And then it hit me. I was trying too hard to be someone I wasn't. I was so focused on this perfect performance that I forgot to just be myself, to connect with the audience, like human to human. So I took a deep breath, ditched the script, and just started talking from the heart. Shared some personal stories, some behind-the-scenes stuff, even talked about some of the times I messed up. And the whole energy of the room changed, just like that. The audience leaned in, started asking questions, sharing their own experiences. It was like we finally found that connection, like we were all in it together. And that presentation, the one I thought was a total disaster, it ended up being one of my best ones. What I learned that day is that being vulnerable is actually a strength. When you're willing to be real, show your flaws, and connect with people authentically, you build trust. And that's something no amount of polish can fake. That's what makes a presentation really stick with people. Those moments of real connection, that's when you get them hooked. Now let's talk about those little things, those nuances that can make or break a presentation. One thing I've learned is that pacing is super important. You're kind of like the conductor, setting the rhythm for the whole thing. If you're not careful, you can lose the audience before you even get to the good stuff.
So start strong. Grab their attention right away. Don't waste time on a bunch of introductions or background info. Get right to the point. And mix up your pace, Speed up, slow down, pause for effect. A monotone voice is a surefire way to put people to sleep. And use your body language. Move around, make eye contact, use your hands. A dynamic speaker is an engaging speaker. Speaking of engagement, let's talk about how to keep the audience's attention where you want it. One of the biggest mistakes speakers make is thinking the audience is automatically following along, that they're seeing what you're seeing, understanding what you're saying. But the truth is, people get distracted easily. Their minds wander, they check their phones, they think about what they're having for dinner. So you got to keep them focused, and visuals are a great way to do that. But not just any visuals. I got to tell a story, evoke emotion, make your points come alive. And don't be afraid to use silence. A well-placed pause can be way more powerful than words. It builds anticipation, emphasizes a point, gives people a moment to think. One of the most powerful tools we have as speakers is storytelling.
Stories have this amazing ability to connect with us emotionally, to transport us, make us feel things, and help us understand complicated ideas. So share your own stories, but make sure they're relevant to your message, that they have a point, and keep them concise. Nobody wants to hear a rambling, pointless story. Now let's talk about things that can go wrong. Because let's face it, no matter how much you prepare, something's bound to happen. You might forget what you were going to say, your tech might fail, you might even spill coffee on yourself. The key is to stay calm and just roll with it. If you forget your train of thought, don't panic. Take a breath, look at your notes, or just admit you blanked and ask if anyone has questions. If you have tech issues, try to stay positive and keep the audience engaged while you get things fixed. And if you spill coffee all over yourself, well, laugh it off. The audience will appreciate that you can handle a mishap with grace and a sense of humor. Remember, public speaking is a performance, but it's also a conversation. And conversations, well, they don't always go perfectly, but that's okay.
What matters most is staying connected with your audience, being authentic, and sharing your message with passion and enthusiasm. And you never know, you might even have some fun along the way. So that's it for our deep dive into the world of public speaking. Remember, it's not about perfection. It's about connecting with your audience, sharing your message with heart, and embracing those moments of vulnerability, because that's where the real magic happens. Now go out there and speak your truth. The world is waiting to hear what you have to say.